Jay Horwitz, a special edition of Amazing Conversations. As we approach the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, I want to go back and reminisce about a great relationship the Mets have with a tremendous organization, Tuesday's Children, which really started the days after the attack. First, I want to introduce, honored to have on the call Becky Rossman, newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of Tuesday's Children. David Spampinato. Close, David. Good, bad, and different.
Yeah, you're good enough. Yeah, however
Good
you want to
enough.
say it.
Let me hear it. He's affectionately known as Spam.
That's easier.
That's how he was affectionately known around the parts of SNY. So
whose dad Don, who was a trader, Cantor Fitzgerald passed away when David was 4, and he's been a part of Tuesday's Children since then. And Todd Zeile, one of the leaders of our 2001 team, proudly, all we did, and Todd was in the forefront of everything. I just wanted to give everybody a little history how this all started. And after the attack, Bobby Valentine, who was our manager there, had a restaurant at the old Holiday Inn, was across from Shea Stadium. He fed first responders. One of the guys who came in was Chris Burke, who lost a parent in 9/11. Hence was the beginning of Tuesday's Children. And from the beginning, we had guys like Al Leiter, Todd Zeile, Bobby Valentine, Robin Ventura, Chris Benson, who really gave a lot of money and time to Tuesday's Children, which really was the first call. He was taking care of the thousands of kids who lost a parent. And, the money these guys gave have started a lot of the programs that are still in place today, which is something we're really proud of. And Becky, why don't we turn it over to you? I know you still take care of the families, mental health and wellness and financial, but you kind of try to branch off to other things with Gold Star families.
Yes. So we're actually taking what we learned in the past 20 years, especially with our long-term mentoring that we used with the youth from 9/11 and kind of leaning into the families of the fallen, the Gold Star children who lost their parents. And it's kind of come full circle. So we have a lot of our junior board members, which are comprised of 9/11 young adults. And some of those were mentees, and they are now mentoring some of our Gold Star youth. So it's kind of nice to see that goal of turning pain into purpose.
Yeah. David, why don't you tell us your experiences with them, with the Met players and the meet and greets we had, and what do one of your first remembrances that comes to Shea for a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, I remember a Christmas party when I was real young where we were able to kind of meet the players, and Tuesday's Children kind of made it almost like a really white glove treatment experience to kind of make you forget like the grief that you were going through and allow you to have these awesome experiences meeting people like Todd, and I remember Joe McEwing being there, just really bringing it on a human level and knowing that there were people that you really looked up to, because every kid says that their dad is their hero or their mom is their hero. But then that was the case for me. But if it wasn't my parents, it was baseball players. So it kind of allowed me to have that relationship with the players and with the team that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten if it wasn't for the partnership between the Mets and Tuesday's Children.
Speaking of, I don't know if I said it, David's part of our partnership teams here at Citi Field. Todd, what do you remember about the early part of our relationship with Tuesday's Children?
I just remember that we spent time, and I think, the guys found ways to chip in monetarily, but that was really less, I think, important or significant in some ways as time. I think time for us was at times precious, but I think during that period right after the attacks and in that next year plus, I think specifically, it felt like we at first felt, quite honestly, a little invasive. And I've told you this many times, Jay, that the first time we went down to ground zero, or the first time that I visited families in the hospital, or the first time that I went and spent time with kids who had lost a parent, I was at a loss for words and really didn't know what to say. And fortunately for me, I had the honor of wearing a uniform that the kids recognized, looked up to, and greeted me with some sort of a smile or warmth that helped me. They helped me as much as I was able to help them. And I think that was what stemmed from my early involvement, was that, hey, I now feel like there is some purpose here that we can serve, if it's just being familiar enough to give somebody, sort of the permission to smile in a time of tragedy. And the more we did, the more I felt connected to the causes, and specifically to Tuesday's Children, because it stemmed so quickly after the attacks.
Becky, let me ask you, you were in the Army in the reserves and you were enlisted right after 9/11?
Actually, I went in 1995, but I was in the inactive ready reserve and got called out a week after 9/11. My unit went to Fort Bragg for a year and backfilled for the 528 Special Ops.
Where were you when 9/11 hit?
I was actually in Central Illinois, going to school and working full time, going to Bradley. I remember we went to class and one of my professor's kids was in the tower. So mainly we just watched the news and waited.
Yeah. David, tell me, you and Todd work together. You have a working relationship, so you know Todd for a while. I mean, one of the good guys I've ever worked with.
It blossomed in kind of a serendipitous way, I think, from the beginning. So when I was probably like 7 years old, me and my family went to a Met game at Shea, and like all little kids, they want to get pictures and autographs and meet their heroes. And Todd was pulling out of the parking lot, and
he left you hanging?
No, Derek Jeter.
Okay, he usually does that.
But yeah, that was Derek Jeter, not Todd.
Okay, good point.
Todd stopped and signed a hat and couldn't have been nicer. And he had no idea that I had lost my dad, or that there was any connection of that, maybe we had met previous or something. And it just kind of happened to be a standard fan to player interaction. And then I ended up getting my first job at a school at SNY, and Todd had started, I think, a little bit before I got there in 2019.
Not much. Yeah.
And when I kind of quickly took the landscape of the place, I kind of said, like, I want to be one of the guys for Todd that's providing him information that can help him on the air. And I don't think we ever fully made the connection about my dad dying on September 11th, because it's like something you don't really know how to bring up. It's not just something where you pull someone aside and say, hey, Todd, like, by the way, my dad died when I was 4 years old, and you were really supportive of my family and these different organizations. So I just remember around the time of September 11th, maybe it was 2020, I think, when there was nobody in the office. I kind of spoke up I was working on the 11th. It was in World Trade Center where the offices are. And I spoke up, and I'll always kind of remember Todd being glued to the TV, watching the game, and just kind of being emotional watching it. And I'll just kind of always remember that. And then after we had made that connection and continued working together, we just kind of fast became friends and have stayed in touch since.
Todd, let me ask you this: as a representative of two, what made the two? I was telling Becky before, when I die on my tombstone, I just want to say I was a part of the 2001 team. Lighter and Frank. I don't want to work the whole. What made that team special? For me, it was probably the best group of guys I've ever worked with. I hope I don't sound people, but for what we did in the community, work with Tuesday's Children, to visit the Ground Zero, what in your mind made that team special?
First of all, I just want to say one thing back to Dave, because I remember the time when you finally kind of broached the subject, and I still, I remember that time well. It is emotional for me to understand what people have been through. And he was more than a guy that worked on providing. I was the worst, Jay, at figuring out. I'm not quite as tech nerdy, as untech savvy as you.
Oh, well, nobody's going to be than me. That's true.
But I had trouble finding the stats that I wanted to say on air or whatever. And Dave became like my right-hand guy. So I was sad to lose him. That said, Jay, that team in 2001 was a product of the team in 2000, which I think, because of the fact that we went through what we did as a team, kind of really felt glued together. We felt like underdogs that achieved a lot. We had this city really kind of rooting for us as the underdogs in the World Series. We didn't win a World Series, but we played together. So that bonded us a lot as a group, and that core group stayed together through 2001. And then 9/11, there was just something about having Johnny, Al, and Bobby V. I think those three, and without taking away from anybody else, those three.
And you.
What I'm saying, those three had a true connection to New York City. They were a part of New York City. They were 1 degree separated or directly impacted by what happened on 9/11. And so as teammates of guys that we loved, we rallied around those guys first, I think, and then recognized that there was some way for us to have some impact. And then I think, I credit our organization, from the Wilpons to you, Susan Lucci. I think the reality that this team—
Not the actor, right, Todd?
Not the actor, Sue, I should say, Sue. Okay. She's a good actor. Let's put it that way. But not the soap actress. Sue and you and the organization, I think, felt like we had a responsibility to the city, that it was not just to the victims, but it was a New York Met. We were New York on our chest. It's the New York Mets. And so I think we gravitated around it. I don't know. It was a special group of guys. And the last thing I'll say on it, Jay, is, I played 16 years. I played for 11 teams. And I'm often asked, A, why do I do the broadcast for the Mets? And B, what was the favorite? Why New York? Why is this a favorite place of mine? And I said, I played in a World Series here. I went through 9/11 here. I ended my career here. But I must know 500 guys that were acquaintances of mine through 16 years and 11 teams. And I have 5 friends. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I have 5 friends. And it's Al, Johnny, Mike, Robin, and Eric Karros. He's the outlier because Eric and I played together at UCLA and then again as Dodgers. And I consider him as still a friend. But I don't have friends outside of that group. I have a ton of acquaintances. But there was something special about that group.
So I'm not your friend then, right?
Yeah, well, you're not a player, Jay. Okay, as much as I wanted to see you on the field, yes. I'm just talking about players that I'm friends.
Becky, let me ask you, what are the major needs of the 9/11 families? A lot of kids are like David have grown. Is it more financial, more wellness? What are the needs that your organization is going to try and cater to going forward?
So one of the things we're doing for 9/11 families still are creating with career resource centers, working with like Goldman Sachs and State Farm to provide opportunities to network with jobs. But what we're also hearing is it's a new season of grief for a lot of our families. So a lot of our 9/11 families, the spouses, it's getting kind of hard after empty nesting, which can be an emotional time anyway for people. But it's just one more season of grief that we want to help with. We found that talking to families, there are things that are unexpected that happen that kind of bump what we call those trauma bruises, and then they go back into counseling. Not everyone can afford counseling, so we would like to help with that if that's a need. So right now we're just kind of leaning in to see how we can still be here and support the families of 9/11, even as we expand our mission.
David, like you told me the other day, you're in touch with the organization a lot. You're helping them out for tickets. I mean, how does it feel? You've been with, you were 26, 24, 25 years old, 20 years. How does it feel to give back to the organization to help your family, get through a traumatic crisis?
Yeah. I mean, Tuesday's Children offered us so much growing up that to me, it's like the least I can do to just, invite some families out to a game and hope that it can put a smile on their face the way it did for me. Whether like I remember playing catch with Ty Wigginton when I was 7 years old, and it was not something that he needed to do. It was not a place that I wouldn't have otherwise been if it wasn't for Tuesday's Children. And then kind of bookend that with the 20th anniversary, being on the field, my brother and I holding the American flag, and just kind of firsthand seeing 50,000 people, supportive of your loss and your grief. It was overwhelming for sure, but I think now it's just, I've been so lucky for all the people that have worked with Tuesday's Children, whether it's, Amy Wright and I have kept in touch forever, and she's tremendous. And I'm always willing to do whatever they need. So whether that I did a half marathon 5 years ago and raised $3,000, like that, I'm doing another one in September that my brother and I are hoping to raise a little bit of money for. So, whatever is, just knowing what Tuesday's Children was able to support for my family, knowing that I can potentially provide that for somebody else in assisting them is an honor.
Becky, one stat I got to throw at you. 600 veterans commit suicide every year. That's a crazy number.
It really is. And to be considered a Gold Star family, you have to lose someone during combat. One thing I love about Tuesday's Children is we work with survivors regardless of the loss, because we do have the suicides, but we also have a lot of training accidents. So we want to be there regardless of how they've lost their loved one.
Yeah. Todd, one last thing for you. That night when Mike hit the home run on the 21st, what was the feeling like in the clubhouse? Was it, should we play? Should we not play? I just got to feel a lot of people up until, the mid-game was still a feeling, are we doing the right thing? Is my recollection wrong, or,
No, I think the recollection is correct. I think that I personally was in favor of playing. I was a player rep. I had been involved in every discussion with MLB, and I just thought that New York was ready for it. I didn't know how that night was going to turn out. Nobody could. When I got there, I didn't know what it was going to be like to play baseball, because everybody felt like baseball was not the real, attraction on stage. It was getting a group of people together to kind of celebrate the city trying to heal. And the way things turned out couldn't have been scripted any better. And I think that Liza Minnelli, I've said this 1,000 times, but I think Liza Minnelli singing New York, New York,
it was great.
To me, was the tipping point to allow families and fans and baseball players to say, hey, there's something going on here that's a healing process, and let's try to celebrate together. And then honestly, the Mike home run almost felt like it was predestined at that point. It felt like, well, of course this is going to happen. We're all together. We just got that energy. We just here's the guy coming up. Oh yeah, and there the ball goes. And I remember recounting this recently, that I didn't jump up and down and celebrate like I was shocked. I almost stayed in the dugout, waited for Mike to come in, almost as if I knew something like that was going to happen. And it was more impactful to me from that standpoint than, oh my gosh, I can't believe what just happened.
Yeah. Becky, let me ask you, people out there who want to contribute, what's the best way to contribute to Tuesday's Children, to do something, to be helpful? Is there a way they can do that?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. Obviously, we can always use donations, but I think, as David just pointed out, and building that long-time relationship and your connection with Todd and the Mets, I mean, those things are equally valuable. And I do want to say thank you to everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Historically, the Mets have brought in $165,000 for Tuesday's Children. I know we wouldn't be able to do this, provide the services we do without you, but it is those connection activities that really mean a lot as well.
Well, we'll keep it going. And one thing about those guys from that team, we always go to a firehouse in September. We got to keep it going. A great group of guys. Becky, Mike, David, Todd, thanks for coming on. And, and I appreciate everything we do. And we do anything we can from our point with the Mets to help Tuesday going forward, like we've done the past over 2 decades. Thank you guys for coming on. All right.
Becky, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Thank you, David.
Good to see you, Spam.